This is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about Bishop Strickland's removal from the bishopric of Tyler, Texas. Now before I begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. I think many of you know that Bishop Strickland from Tyler, Texas was removed on November 11th, I believe was the date that it happened. And I had known, let me back it up. I'm pretty familiar with Bishop Strickland. I do live in Texas. I live in a neighboring diocese of Tyler. And he used to have a weekly radio show on Guadalupe Radio, which is one of the Catholic affiliates here in Central Texas. And I used to listen to him. Clearly, anybody who keeps up with Catholic stuff, especially from the traditional circles, knew of Bishop Strickland because he was one of the few bishops that was outspoken against modernism in the church and some of the things that were going on in the church. And so most people knew about it. And then I think the precipitating factor was that back in the spring, he had posted some tweets. I don't know if they're called tweets anymore, some X's on X that were pretty controversial. And I think that prompted the papacy to send a nuncio to investigate into Strickland and his episcopacy. And the findings came out and they removed him. Now, I want to be clear because you're going to go and you will find a lot of what I call in past videos apocalyptic Catholic content creators, the ones who clickbait, the ones who are constantly pushing, I'm not going to name names, but we know who they are, the mad rad trad deposits over on YouTube who are always worried and pushing that the church is an apostasy, this, you know, fear mongering, gets you angry. It's just no different than cable news, right? If you're on the left or the right, all it does is make you angry and anxious. And I recommend you guys in my very, very small subscriber base to avoid these people. But again, people want salacious gossip, and so when a bishop resigns, or when a bishop, I should say, is forced out because they asked him to resign and he said he wasn't going to resign, he couldn't abandon his flock, people are going to be drawn to this. And if you are from the trad perspective, you're probably going to be angry, and if you're from the modernist side, you're probably going to be happy. But I want to give a balanced, moderate approach here. What do we know about the removal? We know nothing about the removal. The Vatican has removed priests in the past, and they never reveal the findings. Now, you could say this is good or this is bad, but I think it's prudential on one level because let's say there is a priest, and I remember there was a priest like in Puerto Rico that was removed not that long ago, because if there's stuff that's scandalous, the church should not be releasing scandalous information. Certainly, if it's something that's illegal, they should release that person to the authorities and let jurisprudence take its course. But in general, it's an internal investigation, and if it's an internal investigation, don't expect it to be released. Now, the most that we get was from Cardinal DiNardo. So Tyler is under the overall metropolitan of Houston, Galveston, Houston, I should say, where I grew up. So everyone's like it's the Archdiocese of Houston. No, it's the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, because Galveston was a much larger city in the 19th century when that bishopric was founded. So it's Galveston, then Houston, even though Houston is way too large now. And that's why when I go back, I'm like, this town's too big for me. So we have a DiNardo, and this is the closest we're ever going to get to some sort of clerical response. I don't think we're ever going to hear anything from the Vatican. He said, quote, and I'm gleaning this from Catholic World Report, DiNardo said that the following a June apostolic visitation by 2 retired American bishops at the behest of the Vatican that included an exhaustive inquiry to all aspects of the governance and leadership of Tyler under Strickland, a recommendation was made to Pope Francis that the continuation in office of Bishop Strickland was not feasible. And that's all we're going to get officially, probably from the Vatican. That's all we're going to get. So yes, I mean, sure, we could speculate as to why he was removed. One of the reasons that he was posting some things that were pretty strong. That, I mean, look, say what you want about Pope Francis and his pontificate and how he's the master of never responding to dubias, and he's the master of obfuscation to keep things vague, and where we would expect the head of the Church of the Vicar of Christ to give clarity on a lot of things. He's the opposite. He speaks in this vague generality many times, and not always. I think, like, for example, the Synod of Synodality was not nearly as bad as people anticipated it was going to be. And also, Strickland was posting some things about the Synod of Synodality ahead of time. And I think as a whole, it wasn't as bad as it could be. And to Pope Francis's credit, he has been very clear in the past about the definition of marriage. He's been very clear. But in general, we've talked about this in past episodes, like he'll be interviewed by an atheist journalist on an airplane, off the record, on the record, off the record, on the record. And then something will be said, and then it's going to be very misinterpreted. And then when you go back, because the secular press will run with it, and they'll say, well, Francis said this, and then you go back to the Holy Office and ask for clarification. They don't give clarification. Also, Pope Francis doesn't really answer dubias. He did answer a dubia recently going into the Synod, but as a whole, his 10 years of his pontificate, he's not the greatest at answering dubias. So from the Vatican's perspective, some of Strickland's comments via Twitter can be seen as problematic, and not problematic because they're run by New World Order globalist issues, but globalist change agents, but because he's saying things that would lead to scandal. So one of the things that Strickland has said in the past was that the chair that Francis sits on is not his chair. And when you make a comment like that as a bishop, as a prelate of the church, that is not necessarily a comment you want to make. You can tell him that he's not that, but to publicly say that is an issue. Even somebody that's an outspoken advocate for the traditionalists, like Archbishop Vigano, even Vigano wouldn't say something like that. So maybe Strickland's a beneficanist. I don't know, maybe he's a senevicanist. But either way, he said, May 12th, he tweeted that he rejected what Pope Francis's program of undermining the deposit of faith. And that he also said that there was a dangerous lack of clarity in his statements, Pope Francis's statements related to sexuality. That's true. And he's been a vocal opponent to the Synod of Synodality. That's true. And even in August, in a public letter, he said, quote, regrettably, it may be that some will label as schismatics those who disagree with the changes being proposed in the Synod. Instead, those who would propose changes to that which cannot be changed seek to commandeer Christ's church, and they are indeed the true schismatics. Again, you could see why people would be upset with that over in Rome. Now, he is clear, and he said that he doesn't think he thinks Pope Francis is being manipulated by people around him. And he also told people upon his resignation, because he did do a 30-minute interview where he talked about it, that he doesn't want people to leave the church. I guess traditional Catholics don't leave the church because of this, and pray for the Pope and pray for the church, which we should all be doing every day when we do our rosary. In terms of the episcopacy in Tyler, I think what's coming out is that he was probably not the best administrator. We do know that there's a very high turnover rate among the priests in the bishopric of Tyler. There was some controversy of some hirings he did. There were some controversies of a religious order he wanted to bring in. But also you have to flip that with the fact that at a bishopric that only has 120,000 Catholics, there were 22 seminarians in the Archdiocese of Tyler. And I know somebody who knows somebody whose child wanted to go into the seminary that lived in the San Antonio area. And they're like, no, we're going to go to the seminary in Tyler because we respect Strickland. So, you see, and we've seen this played out. We've talked about this in past videos in the last 2 years, how dioceses who adhere to the deposit of faith and have very good respectful masses and adhere to the 2,000 years of deposit of faith tend to have a lot more vocations per capita than the typical dioceses that are doing the watered down, let's fit into the world mindset. So you look at that, and he's bringing in people. I suppose that the best thing to do is just look at it as this. We don't know the truth. If you're a super rad, mad trad, you're going to see the Vatican muzzling a traditional bishop and removing him from his seat. And I get that. I'm not happy that Strickland was removed, but let's be fair and let's try to practice the cardinal virtue of prudence. We don't know all the information. We don't. We don't. All we know is what DiNardo released, that when the nuncios went there, they did the investigation, they realized that Strickland shouldn't be. Is he being blackballed? Possible, absolutely, right? Because he is a vocal critic of Pope Francis's pontificate. Absolutely. And I think the thing that makes most traditional Catholics upset is that you see, like the German bishops, you see very liberal priests and bishops, or you see priests that have been alleged of doing really bad things, and they're not removed, they're not defrocked, they're not removed. The German bishops aren't removed from their office, and they're like, why are you targeting Strickland and you're not targeting the thing? And I think that's a valid thing to say. But I'm not going to be like the apocalyptic YouTubers, Catholic YouTubers, and it's irresponsible to just speculate all these things when we don't know the truth. No one can say, and this goes back to, the guy in Wichita Falls, Texas, knows for sure the church is an apostasy. You live in Wichita Falls. There's no way you can say with certitude, but it's the sin of pride. And this is the sin of pride again. No one can say they know the truth as to why Strickland was removed. We can speculate, and I think speculating is pointless because there's no way that the speculation will end up blooming into fruition, right? So what do we do? How about we listen to Bishop Strickland, or former Bishop Strickland? He's still a bishop. He'll be a bishop for life. He just doesn't have a seat right now. Well, let's listen to Strickland. And Strickland said what? Pray for the Pope, pray for the church. Don't leave the faith. Don't go to orthodoxy. We have videos why trad casts shouldn't go to orthodoxy. So let's just listen to Strickland. And then we're going to find out more news. Like Strickland is probably going to do some speaking tours. He still is going to be on Twitter. So I'm sure news is going to come out eventually. We'll find out what it is. But I think don't be angry and don't be anxious, because these are poisons that we concoct that only we drink. We can't control, and this is very important, we cannot control what's going on in the Vatican. We can't affect change in the Vatican. We can't affect change in the USCCB. What can we do? Go to daily Mass, pray the Rosary, try to stay in a state of grace, do our works of mercy, do the things that make us and improve our interior life, and spend less time on YouTube, Reddit, and all these places, because all they do is fuel anger and anxiety. And just stay away from that. Immerse yourself in true Catholic content that's going to improve your faith, and stay away from all this clickbait stuff. Eventually, the truth will come out, and then we'll go from there. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. What's your take as to why Strickland was removed? Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.